Hi everyone, welcome to a new video. Thanks for joining me today. Today I have a little bit of a shorter video for you compared to the previous ones. I will be drawing a dog eye in colored pencil. It is sped up, so not a real-time video, but I will be explaining what I do throughout the process. So as always, I am working on Canson 1557 paper. And I'll be using Faber-Castell Polychromos and a white Caran d'Ache luminance to blend. That's what I always use. So I have the outlines already drawn out. You can find the reference on screen in the top right. I'm not always completely copying the reference, I'm just using it as a guide. And the first thing I'm starting out with is outlining the eye and all the important shapes in the drawing. So the lashes as well, and then the pupil and the highlights. I'm all outlining it pretty lightly. I'm using a brown tone for this. This is walnut brown. I could have started out with black right away as the eye is so dark. But if you start out with black right away and you make a little mistake in your line, it's very hard to correct that. So that's why I'm starting out with brown. And my pressure is very light so that the line is not too thick. Then I will be overlining it with black. So if I'm happy with all the outlines, with all the shapes, I'm going over with black, darkening everything up. Make sure that the lines, that the pencil is very sharp, the point is very sharp. I am using a Faber-Castell color grip sharpener. That's my favorite sharpener. Also for pastel pencils it works really well, and for graphite pencils. So I would definitely recommend the Faber-Castell color grip. It's a grayish sharpener with 3 holes in it. Alright, so after outlining the eye, I am going to start coloring the eye. So I start with the iris on the outer edges, and I'm starting off with a brown. The eye is very dark, but I'm building up the layers from light to dark, so I'm starting off with brown. Then I always like to use Caput Mortem Violet with brown, because it deepens the color, it makes the brown a lot deeper. So I layer that on top, and then I work towards the center where it becomes a little bit lighter, the color. And there I'm using burnt sienna, a little bit of bistre, a little bit of nougat. And I'm building up the layers by using quite light pressure to start with. So my pressure stays light until the very, very last layers. This way I can build up a lot of layers without the paper getting saturated too quickly. Then for the pupil, I could actually see a blue tone in it. So I'm not starting out with black, I'm starting out with dark indigo. This is a very dark blue tone. And with that I put down a light layer. The outer edges of the pupil I darkened up with brown, so I went on top of it with brown. I saved the black for last when it comes to the pupil, as you can always find other colors in it. If I would started out with black and I just made the pupil black, it would have looked very dead. The eye would have looked dead, and I don't want that. So I figured that the pupil could be a little bit darker, so I'm going on top with another layer of dark indigo, then some Caput Mortem Violet because it looks really good in combination with dark indigo. And I left the center of the pupil a little bit lighter. And then when I put all the layers down and the paper felt more or less saturated, I started burnishing. So I do the burnishing when I feel that the paper can't really take a lot more layers. That's when I burnish. So with a very sharp pencil, I push the colors into the paper. It lightens up the colors, but it also smooths out the texture of the paper, which gives a really nice effect, or an effect that I really like. So I don't use a too heavy pressure when burnishing because I want to go on top of that and add more layers. The burnishing with the white pencil, it lightens up the colors, it flattens them out. So that's why I want to go on top with the darker colors and hype up the contrast again. Alright, so I've drawn around the highlights all this time. So now it's time to put some color into the highlights. Such a big highlight is never completely white. So in the reference you can also see quite some blue in it. I could have added more blue now when I look at it, but I didn't add too much blue. I added indanthrine blue, I think, and then a bit of sky blue. And then when the blue was added, I added the reflection of the lashes onto the highlights. By the way, the full real-time process of this drawing with narration is available up on Patreon for the $4 tier. It's about 2 hours. So if you're interested in following and drawing along, you can have a look on there. Alright, then at the bottom of the eye you can find a highlight as well, which you can't really see that well on the reference, but when you zoom in you can. So I put some blue in that as well, and then I decided that it was time to move on with the lashes and the skin around the eye. So because it's such a close-up, you could see the hairs of the lashes quite well. So I've drawn them out by drawing around the lashes with a darker color, as the lashes were quite light. And then I added some color in the lashes. I'm not sure which colors. I think they were terracotta, burnt ochre, and a bit of burnt sienna. Then I wanted to put some very small bright highlights in the eye, and I did that with a white jelly roll pen. So I wouldn't recommend this if you were to sell your drawing, because the jelly roll pen is not archival, but I'm not planning on selling this drawing, so I just used the pen. You could also use a mixture of touch-up texture and titanium white by Aliona Nicholson, but I don't have that, so I still need to get it. But that mixture has proven to be archival. It works really well on top of colored pencil. Alright, then for the skin around the eye and the eyelids, I used a base layer of gray. So that was a Payne's gray, which is a cool gray. A gray with a blue tone in it. I put a few layers of that down, and then I burnished to make it all very smooth. And then I wanted to do a little bit of fur around the eye, not too much, but just the transition from the skin into the fur, as it's quite interesting to draw. For the fur, I started off with a base layer of raw umber 10%, that's by Carnage. I really like that color because I can't really find a similar color in the Faber-Castell Polychromos line. So I really like to use raw umber 10% as an addition to my Polychromos pencils. So I put a solid base layer of that down. And your base layer is very important to already draw in the right direction of the hair growth, so that's important. Then after putting that base layer down, I started adding the fur texture. And as the fur is quite light, I add the fur texture by drawing the shadows in between the hairs. So with a dark brown, that was walnut brown, I just started drawing lines, hairs or lines, and it's important to not make them all the same. Leave some space open in between them, change the direction, and that creates the shadows in between the hairs. And then you can just start layering. So also when drawing fur, make sure to start off light and not too much pressure, and then you can start building up the color. So that raw umber 10% was just a base tone, but I added a bistre to it as well and a little bit of pink. So for light fur like this, I always like to combine yellow tones and pink tones because they contrast each other. So if the fur looks too yellow, if you added too much bistre, for instance, you can add a little bit of a pink tone on top, for instance light flesh, and that works really well together. Then finally I used black to create the darkest shadows in between the hairs, especially in the transition from the skin into the fur. And then I went on with the final details, hyping up the contrast a bit more. And I figured that I had lost a bit of the light hairs in the fur, so I went in with my Tombow Mono Zero eraser and I just erased out some lighter hairs. And that was basically it. So this was a small study, it took about 2 hours. I could have made it a lot more realistic, but this was just a quick lesson on how to layer to get a realistic eye effect. So the whole video in real time is available up on Patreon for $4, the $4 tier. You get access to all the other $4 tutorials as well when signing up. Find more information on Patreon, so there's a link in the description if you're interested, and I really appreciate your support. And that was it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, leave them below in the comments, and then I will see you next time.